Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome into another episode of Ding You here on a Friday. We are approaching the beginning of the Sweet 16. Super excited. I gotta say, I kind of like this new schedule, this Saturday through Tuesday, getting these Sweet 16 games, full day of action on Saturday and Sunday, and then we get the Elite Eight in prime time on Monday and Tuesday. I am Michael Beller. We are going to be talking about our favorite Sweet 16 games against the spread here on this episode of Ding You, presented, of course, by our friends and partners at BetMGM. I am joined, as I am, you already know this, every single episode of Ding You, by Brian Bennett. Brian, what is happening, my man? Sweet 16 is here. It was a longer wait than usual, but I am pumped up for these games. How you doing today?
Doing great. Feels kind of weird not to have Sweet 16 games on a Thursday or a Friday, but I think it's going to be really fun to have each one have their own window and the Elite Eight have its own window on Monday and Tuesday. So we'll see how that goes, but some really exciting matchups. Can't wait.
Yeah, I got to say, I really didn't miss the games yesterday, but today I was feeling like, man, it would be nice if there were some games on a Friday leading us into the weekend, but it'll be fun, as you said, with every single game having its own window in the Sweet 16. So no overlap there, and then we get nice prime time on Monday and Tuesday with Elite Eight setting us up for the Final Four. Let's get into these games, Brian. We've got 4 games that you and I selected off the jump that we like as our favorite games of the weekend from a betting perspective. I'm going to let you go first with your first game, and that one is in the South region where we have number 1 seeded Baylor laying 7.5 against number 5 seeded Villanova. This should be, I think this is a fun game. You know, it's obviously both teams' biggest test to this point. It's been impressive with what Villanova has been able to do to get here without Colin Gillespie, but still feeling like a game that Baylor should be able to handle, in my opinion. Where are you at on this one?
Yeah, I love Baylor here. And I'll take you back to last season. I happened to be in Myrtle Beach for the Myrtle Beach Invitational. Baylor played Villanova. This was before people were really in on Baylor. They played Villanova in the title game, beat them by 9. Now, that is not really at all relevant to this discussion, but a lot of the same personnel on both sides. And, you know, Villanova had Colin Gillespie. They had Sadiq Bey at the time. And Baylor really handled them defensively. And I just think this is a great matchup for Baylor because of what they can do defensively on the perimeter. Villanova is so perimeter-oriented. And, you know, Baby Arch has done a great job filling in for Gillespie so far, but now he's got to face Davion Mitchell. And good luck with all that because, you know, I give Villanova a lot of credit for getting here despite the injuries, but their matchups haven't been super difficult. You know, I liked Winthrop a lot, obviously in the first round, but that's a team they should beat from the Big South. Things just go way up here, and the way Baylor's playing, I just really like them to win and cover.
Hey, I learned from the Chicago Bulls Twitter account that it's Big Arch's birthday today. So how about that?
Hey, there you go.
Big Arch has got one of the biggest basketball games of his life tomorrow. Big Arch celebrating, I think they said it was his 27th birthday. So happy birthday, Ryan Arcidiacono. I'm with you on this. You know, it's a big step up in weight class. And again, even though there were 2 games where they were favored, first against Winthrop and second against North Texas, it's still an impressive job for them to get to this point without their point guard. That's a hard sell for any team, no matter who you're playing. Those were still 2 tournament quality teams in Winthrop and North Texas. North Texas pulling off an upset against Purdue in the first round. Like, I don't really care who you play. That's an impressive job by Jay Wright and this Villanova team to get to this point. But this is a much bigger ask, and I'm with you in the fact that it's the perimeter of Baylor that is going to give this Villanova team fit. So I am with you on this one. It's one I'm still mulling over as to am I going to play it or not, but if I do play it, it will be on the Baylor side. And for what it's worth, KenPom's got this actually as just a 4-point game, Baylor winning 77-73. So expecting a little bit less off the spread from where it is. But again, it's Baylor or nothing for me.
You wonder how much the KenPom factors in the Gillespie loss too.
Right.
You just don't know if it's compiling season-long data. Sure. With Gillespie, this is a close game. Maybe Villanova wins it, but I just don't see them winning it without Gillespie.
Totally with you there. It's going to be a very hard road for Villanova in this game against Baylor. For my, you know what? I'm going to save our absolute best bets for the very end of the show. This is going to be in my discussion, and I'll think it over the next 20 minutes or so. Michigan, the number 1 seed in the East region, they are 2.5-point favorites against Florida State. I really like Michigan. I mean, you know that already. You probably could have guessed when I pulled this game up that I was going to be going with Michigan. And, obviously we've talked so much about Isaiah Livers and how this team is different without him, but I still think that what they've shown without him, I mean, they've played 3 games without Isaiah Livers. One was a 1-point loss to Ohio State, who earned a 2 seed in the tournament. One was an easy win over Texas Southern, and one was a hard-fought win against LSU, but a game where, for the entire second half, Michigan felt like it was in control of that game against a very good, peaking LSU team. And so I think they go into this game as obviously the better team, but also in a game that I think that they can match up relatively well. We know that Florida State's length, Florida State's depth is going to cause a lot of teams trouble. But in Hunter Dickinson, Michigan's got someone who can counteract that, someone who can be the best player on the floor in a way that can directly attack Florida State's strength. This can be a strength-on-strength matchup where Michigan can be the aggressor and the better team and have the bigger strength. And so I look at that. I look at the way Franz Wagner has been playing of late, and I look at the shooters that Michigan can still put around Dickinson, even without Isaiah Livers. And I really think that this is a game that can be won by the Wolverines. You give me Dickinson, you give me Wagner, you give me Eli Brooks, and I think that you have the best trio on Michigan's side rather than Florida State's side. I think this is going to be a great game. I think that either one of these teams is incredibly capable of going to the Final Four and maybe even doing a little damage once they get to Indy. I just still want to side with Michigan. We're putting a lot of stock into the Livers injury, as we should, but this was a very, very good to great team all season long. And taking one player away from that equation, no matter how good he is, doesn't negate that. We've seen that over the first two rounds for the Wolverines, and I think we see that again in the Sweet 16. I am backing Michigan against Florida State. This is one that I have already placed. Where are you at on this game?
Well, we get it, Michael. You got to go with the last Big Ten team in the field, of course. I think Brendan Quinn did a fantastic job of breaking this down. Yeah. If you didn't watch or listen to yesterday's show, please go back and do that if you're interested in this game, because I thought he made some really good, excellent points about how Michigan has faced a couple teams similar to Florida State in style and length already in this NCAA tournament and how well they've fared. For me, this is a stay away, because I could see this game going a lot of different ways. I could see it being close. I could see Michigan blowing Florida State out. I could see Florida State blowing Michigan out. I just don't really know what to expect here when you got two teams that are pretty evenly matched from an athleticism and length standpoint, two teams that at times have looked like world beaters, and at other times, have had a few stumbles. And again, when you factor in Michigan not being at full strength, I just don't know where to go with this one, and it scares me a little bit. I do like Michigan to win this game, but I'm just a little scared to pick it, one way or the other. But if I was going to do anything, I might go with the over. I think I saw that about 144. I'm not sure what you're seeing there for BetMGM lately, but I can see both these teams, getting into the high 70s. Both are very, very capable of scoring points. 143.5. There we go. I think I would go with the over on that, even though both are pretty good defensively.
Yeah, I could definitely see it going that way as well, but I feel comfortable with my Michigan wager. I'll let you take on the total. Let's move it over to the Midwest region. Now, we know this has been the topsy-turviest region of this NCAA tournament. We've got two double-digit seeds, an 11 and a 12. We've got an 8 in Loyola taking down Illinois in the second round. And then we've got the 2-seed Houston, the top seed still remaining in the region. They are laying 7 points against the 11-seeded Syracuse Orange in this game. And this one is, talk about a stay away. This is just the easiest stay away for me. I want to believe in Houston. I want to believe that what they've shown and what their strength is can counteract what Syracuse is going to do. But then I just think of how hot the Syracuse team has been shooting the ball. And there are a lot of good ways, shooting the ball well and shooting 50% from three, like we've seen from Syracuse, and better than 50% from three, can counteract pretty much everything else that the other team is doing. So while Syracuse is shooting the ball this well, I just don't want to touch it. You want to touch it, though. Where are you going with this one?
I'm going back to 1996. Cuse is in the house. Oh, my God. I'm picking Syracuse with 7 points. That's a lot considering how well Syracuse has played. Houston with some injury concerns with DeJon Jarreau and his hip pointer. This zone, I think, at the worst case scenario, I think Syracuse could muck this game up a little bit, keep it kind of ugly. Best case scenario, Buddy Boeheim, the greatest shooter on the planet right now, goes off, scores 30. Syracuse wins this game outright. Again, I think Houston's going to have some problems with that zone. Just they're not set up to really defeat a zone like this. Don't have a lot of size up front. They're an outstanding offensive rebounding team and we're second best in the country. So that's an area where they could have a big advantage. But, if you're missing a lot of shots and getting offensive rebounds, you still got to make some shots once you get the ball back. And, I just like Syracuse here with the points. I'll take this all day.
Yeah, Matthew Gutierrez went over that on yesterday's show. Matthew, of course, covers Syracuse for us here at The Athletic and talked about how West Virginia, kept itself in the game and nearly won it on the strength of its offensive rebounding in the second round against Syracuse. Ultimately, the shooting of Syracuse was a little bit too much, and that zone did do a good job, right? The only way you're getting offensive rebounds is if you're missing shots. So the zone definitely did its job for Syracuse in both of their first two games against San Diego State and West Virginia when it came to those first shot opportunities. Houston's going to need to hit a few more of those than those first two teams did if they're going to cover the 7. Forget about the win. We're more interested in covering that 7 as we're talking about these games against the spread. Last one we're going to look at before we bring on some of our guesses in the East region, Alabama. They are minus 6.5 according to the latest odds from BetMGM against number 11 UCLA. I love Alabama in this game. I can't get enough of Alabama in this game. UCLA has done a hell of a job to get to this point. The comeback against Michigan State in the first 4, the cruising past BYU in the first round, taking care of business as we expected them to do against Abilene Christian in the second round. Nothing to take away from UCLA getting to this point, but this is where it ends. Alabama's pace, Alabama's shooting, Alabama's defense. This is going to be a much, much different game for UCLA, frankly, than they've really seen all season. And I just don't think that they are equipped to stick with Alabama. This has a game that feels to me like it's going to be close in the first half, almost to the point where I would sort of like UCLA in the first half. But then again, the pace, the shooting, the defense of Alabama is going to make them the winner in this one going away. I am very excited for this one. I think it's going to be fun because of what we know from Alabama's offense and what we've seen from Jaime Jaquez and Johnny Juzang on UCLA's side. I think this is going to be one of the more just purely fun basketball games to watch of the Sweet 16. But ultimately, I think we're talking about a 10 or 11-point victory for Alabama. So this is one that is very strongly. I circled it right away when the matchup was set. The lines came out. I felt very comfortable about it, and I still do all these days later. Give me the Crimson Tide with a ton of confidence. Is this one that you are playing in any way here, Brian?
I'm all in on Alabama as well. I love this. I'm surprised the line is as small as it is. It's got me a little nervous, actually. But shout out to Mick.
Yep.
Shout out to Mick Cronin.
Yeah, for sure.
Cincinnati fans were ready to run him out of town because he couldn't get out of the second round with a lot of good teams there in Cincinnati. And now look what happens. He's in the Sweet 16 after UCLA lost its best player earlier in the year, and Cincinnati is a complete mess right now. So I think some Cincinnati fans might like to have Mick Cronin back. But as you mentioned, this is a game of pace. I thought Seth Davis did a great job breaking this down in his Sweet 16 picks that are on The Athletic right now. You should go read that. But Alabama, obviously one of the fastest teams in the country. UCLA, really surprisingly, under Mick Cronin, one of the slowest teams in the country. They really want to play a half-court style. Yeah, but Maryland tried the same thing, right? Maryland's a slow half-court team, and Alabama just buzzsawed them. It wasn't even close. And I think it's just really, really difficult to slow Alabama down because they play such good defense. They create opportunities off of turnovers, and they come down and take so many threes. And if they're hitting like they have been, or at least in the last game they were, it's just really, really hard to slow this team down. And while UCLA, what they've done is admirable, and they do have some length on the perimeter, to counter Alabama. I like the way this Alabama team is playing. I like their style against UCLA. I love this line. I'm going with it all day long.
Yeah, sometimes we like to find the angles. We like to think about how they can scheme this and scheme that to counteract what Team X wants to do. Sometimes it really just does come down to the better team being better, and I think that's ultimately what we get from Alabama against UCLA. Brian, you mentioned that you thought this 6.5 was a little smaller than you would have expected, making you a little bit nervous about it. Who better to talk to about that than Jason Scott, the VP of Trading at BetMGM, joining us for every episode here of Ding You. Jason, thank you once again for joining us today. When I was going through and getting ready for this show, I was just surprised at how many big spreads that we have in the Sweet 16. And of course, we expect an upset here, an upset there, a 1 versus 12, a 2 versus 10. Not the craziest thing that we're expecting to see, or 2 versus 11 in the Sweet 16. But we just have a lot of games in this particular Sweet 16 that are 6 or 6.5 points and higher. We're not getting a ton of 1s versus 4s or 2s versus 3s or 1s versus 5s, anything like that. So from the standpoint of a bookmaker, how do you treat a round like this where we do have bigger spreads than you typically expect to see in a Sweet 16?
It's a great question. And the spreads sort of get to a point where they become almost impossible to manage. And the Gonzaga one's a perfect example. Now, if you told Mark Few that his team had to win by 13, I would suggest they'd be minus 400 to win by minus 13. But they got a game in 2 days. Gesbert, Suggs, Timmy, they're going to be on the court in the last 4 minutes. So there's a real randomness when you get that far out that I don't really think the bookmakers or the punters have much control. And anyone who's willing to take those big spreads, good luck to you. The 6 and the 7, they're the tricky ones. And they're the ones, and we'll probably get to this later in this call, they're the ones where we've seen significant movement. Tend to be games where we handicap them pretty close, 1.5, 1.5. You don't seem to see the movement there traditionally than what you see games that might start 5, 6, 7, 8. The customers and the sharps tend to have a pretty strong opinion on those games, and there's one or two today that fit that criteria.
Jason, let's take a look at the Saturday games. You mentioned on yesterday's show that Villanova and Syracuse, just by virtue of where they are getting a lot of action. Are those the two games you're seeing the most action on, or are there other games on Saturday that you've seen?
Yeah, Villanova and Baylor is the one for us. And now, is it because it's the second game of the day? I'm not sure. We again, as you would expect, we've seen a lot more business for the Saturday games than the Sunday games, and that's fairly standard. You tend to see business on the early games first. Whether Oregon State and Loyola Chicago doesn't really seem like it's grabbed the heart of the country, but certainly Villanova Baylor is the game where we've written the most tickets so far.
Yeah, definitely like to get that action in first, see where you go on Saturday, and then make your plans for Sunday. But those Sunday matchups, of course, are set, and it does have one of those 6, 7, 8 lines in the Alabama-UCLA game. Is that the one getting the most action early here on Sunday, or is there something else that's jumping out at bettors?
No, it's UCLA, Alabama. And frankly, all of our customers agree with the two of you. It's one-way traffic. This game's got a smell of it, of the Illinois-Loyola game last Sunday, in that it's almost the same sort of spread, 6.5, 7. It's all one-way traffic, and it'll probably determine the bookmaker's day whether or not that spread's covered.
Probably guarantees a UCLA victory. Have you seen any meaningful line movements on these games since you set the match, since the matchups are set? Excuse me.
Yeah, I'm going to get a bit boring here because I'm pretty much going to come back to the same games we've already mentioned. So Villanova, we sort of opened a little bit higher than everyone else. We sort of opened 7. Nearly everyone else opened 6. It's gone to 7.5, but the total there's the big mover. At over 136, it's now at the 141.5. We've seen a little bit of movement on Roberts, Arkansas. Total, it's 160 down to 158.5. And then on Sunday again, Alabama-UCLA is the big mover. It's -5 out to -6.5. The total 143.5 to 145.5. So that a little bit of that is the bookmakers being defensive because the money's coming one way, but there are some sharps showing a lot of interest as well.
Yeah, it's not necessarily the most comforting to see it moving like that. So hopefully anyone agreeing with us on Alabama was able to get in when it was still sitting down at 5.5. As we're talking, right, this is just Friday afternoon. Friday morning in some parts of the country. We do still have 24 hours or so to go before the first Sweet 16 game tips off, 48 hours before our second set of games gets going on Sunday. Is there anything you will be watching over these next 24 to 48 hours that could determine where some of these games ultimately end up by the time they tip off?
Yeah, look, there's not too many injury concerns. I think Houston's got one that might make a small change. Look, can I be honest? This is a walk in the park for us at the moment. Given we've been through with the NFL season with COVID and never know who was playing, the NBA sort of trying to fit as many games into a condensed season with people playing 4 games a week. We never know who's suiting up. That was when we weren't in the trade period like we've been this week. So a tournament like this where it's the grand finals, everybody's trying, it's much easier for bookmaking, and this goes for all sports, than the regular season.
All right, there we go. Well, we'll be watching over the next 24, 48 hours, not only how things move, but what goes down on the court. That's Jason Scott from BetMGM. Jason, thanks again for joining us. We will talk to you on Monday, getting ready for the Elite Eight.
Thank you, gents.
Thanks.
All right, of course, we've got a partnership going with BetMGM. We're here to bring you the best exclusive offer. Bet alongside us and win. Right now, we are offering Ding You listeners a risk-free first bet up to $600. Just sign up at BetMGM.com. Use the bonus code DailyDing to take advantage of this special offer from the king of sportsbooks. This offer is for new customers. It's a risk-free first bet up to $600 at BetMGM.com with the bonus code DailyDing. Visit BetMGM.com for terms and conditions. All right, Brian, you ready to talk some upsets here?
All the time, always.
Sweet 16 upsets.
I'm always about the upsets, yeah.
Hey, well, who better to do it with than Peter Keating and Jordan Brenner? Peter and Jordan, creators of the slingshot model with the team at Furman. Now, I just want to give you guys a little bit of kudos before we talk to you. Some of the games you highlighted in the first and second round, Abilene Christian over Texas, you guys gave that better odds than what the money line odds would suggest. Ohio in their first round matchup with Virginia, North Texas against Purdue, Syracuse to get to this point, Loyola in the second round against Illinois. So definitely highlighting some of the teams that were able to advance at least one round in Loyola's case all the way here to the Sweet 16. First question we have.
Great to see you. That was an outstanding segment. Good to talk with you.
Well, Peter, let me bring this to you first. Before we talk about these games that are coming up in the Sweet 16, give us a little bit of background. Your slingshot model, what does it look for when you are trying to predict upsets?
All right. Well, we do this in 3 stages with a statistical model that Jordan and I have been working on for years. You know, Jordan picked George Mason back in 2006. So
pretty good. Before
we were using advanced metrics at all, he flipped through about 400 pages of magazines and somehow came up with George Mason. That's where this all began. We use the basic power ratings to compare basic teams' basic strength, their margin of victory adjusted by the strength of schedule. But on top of that, the heart of this is that we've gone back and looked at successful overdogs and deep underdogs, looking at teams separated by at least 5 seeds in the tournament. And we've seen what characteristics are special to either great long shots or vulnerable Goliaths. And then we apply those lessons to the teams in the current field and see who carries those same characteristics. In some cases, we also look at style matchups because it turns out through statistical analysis, you can also cluster giants and killers, if you will, into different kinds of families. I mean, we all know there's some underdogs who win by slowing the game down and trying to get a lot of offensive rebounds. There's other killers who are more familiar to most people who bomb away, from 3. They're very different kinds of teams, and they fare well or poorly against very different kinds of giants. So you put those 3 steps together, the basic strength, what we call the secret sauces of being overdogs and underdogs, and then style matchups, and we convert that into an estimated winning chance. And I think the big thing to keep in mind is this is a lot about, because you're in a lose one game and go home situation, this is a lot. And also because all the teams are pretty good now. I mean, even the 15 seeds are pretty good. Sometimes the 16 seeds are pretty good. There's a lot about what happens on a night where you can't shoot well for one reason or another. Either, somebody twists an ankle, or you just have an off night, or the underdog is persistent, or, or the other team's better than you thought. What happens when your shots aren't falling? How do you build possessions? Big favorites want to run on cruise control. They want to take their advantage in points per possession and extend it without stumbling. So they just cannot turn the ball over. I was talking to a Texas fan this morning, talking about what a cheap win Abilene Christian had. And I'm like, what do you mean? They led the country in forcing turnovers, and Texas had 23 turnovers. That's the recipe. So if you get offensive rebounds, if you force turnovers, that's a really good way to build possessions, even on a night where you can't guarantee you're going to shoot as well as you did in the regular season. Also, I have one other thing to say. I'm wearing my Press Virginia shirt today.
Oh, there you go.
Because Bob Huggins' teams build possessions like no others in the country. Even when they can't hit the ground falling out of a helicopter, they get more shots than their opponents. Yeah. And that can make a big difference, especially in this setting.
Of course, West Virginia did lose to Syracuse. And Jordan, that's what I want to ask you about. I'm all over Syracuse in this matchup against Houston. You could use a computer model, or you could just look at previous brackets and see how well Syracuse does in this format as a double-digit seed. But according to your computer models, your projections, how likely is it for the Orange to keep playing after this game on against Houston?
We give it about a 1/3 chance of an upset. There's a real big problem that Syracuse has in this game, and that's everybody always thinks about the zone as being vulnerable to three-point shooting. That's not really true. Syracuse, year in, year out, holds teams to a below-average three-point shooting percentage. Where you beat that zone is on second shots. Always one of the worst defensive rebounding teams in the country, Syracuse. So you start with that. Then you take Houston. They're the second best offensive rebounding team in the country. So if they're going to beat, they could get half their misses in this game. And just watching them play, watching them in the first 2 rounds, you see that they're a second shot team. They're about getting the ball up on the glass, going and getting it and putting it back. So I worry a lot about Syracuse from that perspective. The other thing is Syracuse, which we highlighted. It's funny. We highlighted this about them, why they made an ex-killer in the first couple of rounds, which was that they had streaky shooting potential. They shot it okay during the regular season, but they had 3 guys who could get hot on any given night. And you saw Buddy Boeheim in particular, but also Joseph Girard III, knock down threes at a higher rate than you're used to. That's not sustainable. So could they get hot for a third straight game? Yes. Could you bank on it? I wouldn't. The model gives them a pretty good chance. If I'm betting this game, I'm leaning toward Houston.
Yeah, that's where I am leaning as well. So you and I against Brian in this one. Peter, let's go over to the UCLA game and the way that they've gotten to this point. The impressive OT win, the comeback against Michigan State. Then they cruise against BYU. They cruise against Abilene Christian. Now they go into a matchup where they are really taking a big step up in weight class, not only necessarily with what they have seen in the tournament, but for basically the entire season. Really not a Pac-12 team quite like Alabama. How does the model feel about UCLA being able to pull off this upset and move on to the Elite Eight?
We have to be careful about saying who does and does not resemble a Pac-12 team after this tournament.
It's true.
Yeah.
You know, our basic analysis is kind of like a network analysis, and the network just apparently, and it's understandable because of the lack of interconference games, especially at the beginning of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Our model just did not apparently know what to make about Pac-12 teams, but I think it's safe to say it is by far the toughest team that UCLA is going to have faced all season. I mean, UCLA's win against Abilene Christian, it was very impressive. I just joked about the Texas fan complaining about Texas lost to ACU, but UCLA lost the ball only 9 times after Texas had lost it 23, and they held Abilene Christian to shooting, I think it was 4 of 19 on 3-pointers, and they won by 20. That's one of UCLA's most impressive wins of the year. The same day, Maryland went down, Maryland, which is like 40 or 50 spots higher, right, in national rankings than Abilene Christian, went down by just about the same margin to Alabama. Alabama destroyed Maryland, and Alabama has been kind of destroying everybody. And Alabama is a tribute to analytics, not just to excellent play. I mean, Alabama is taking 47% of its shots from behind the arc, and they're hitting them. And they're allowing their opponents to shoot from behind the arc only about a third of the time. I mean, that's a huge gap. It's almost like the 3-point revolution, which is kind of struck a few teams down in the lower ranks, has finally come to major conference play with Nate Oates. I mean, they're only allowing opponents to shoot under 30% on threes. It's very hard to see how any team can pull an upset unless Alabama suddenly stumbles into making a bunch of turnovers. But our model just doesn't think that UCLA can impose the pace. They play very slow, and they've made their opponents play slow in this tournament. But it's hard to see how that happening to Alabama in a way that leads to some kind of disaster. Our model gives it a 22% chance of happening. Now, when we published that was lower than the money line. I think the spread has been widening, right? So I don't know how far below the money line is now, that 22%. But as we wrote, it's hard to see much brewing.
Well, and that's and Peter makes a really good point for a betting audience. We're looking at odds of teams actually winning, right? We're thinking about a bracket. If you're picking a bracket, if you're in a pool that rewards upset points, things like that. The idea of playing these high variance games, right, is from a basketball perspective, in a one and done scenario, it doesn't matter if you lose by 1 or lose by 30. There are no moral victories in the NCAA tournament. So you want to play as risky a style as possible to optimize your chances of winning the game, because again, if you lose by a lot, it doesn't matter. So, that's one reason why sometimes I'm wary to take the same teams we like to with a high upset potential as against the spread, although they did fantastically well against the spread in the first couple rounds. But it's just a different set of strategies, right?
That's why that Oral Roberts game against Arkansas is going to be fun. But if you do believe in Oral Roberts, I would not bet the point spread in that game, because they have shown that they will very intelligently take risks. I mean, they'll leave their players in for 40 minutes a game, right? Gamble against exhaustion. They'll shoot threes. They'll shoot threes even though they already shot more threes than just about anybody. Only a dozen 15 seeds had ever tried 35 or more 3-pointers in the tournament. And they did it in the first round, and then they tried 30 more in the second round. And they started trying to force turnovers, which they had shown no particular talent for in the regular season. And all of a sudden they got 36 turnovers against Florida and Ohio State. Now, is any of that likely to work in the next round? No, but they will probably try, and they could try, and they won't give up, and they may keep trying until they lose by 40 points. So exactly what Jordan's talking about, if all you're trying to do is win, you don't care about how much you lose. That's especially true of a team like Oral Roberts, which believes in itself, but is out and is smart about it, but is totally outclassed.
Yeah, to wrap things up on your point there, it's an 11.5 point spread. Oral Roberts plus 450 on the money line. So that's what you're looking at if you are looking at wagering on the Oral Roberts side of that game, and maybe they can keep things marching, pull off another upset, and get on into the Elite Eight. Peter Keating, Jordan Brenner, thanks so much for joining us today. We'll talk to you guys again in the Elite Eight, right? Thumbs up, Elite Eight.
Yes, we're here. Excellent.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks so much for joining us today. We appreciate it. All right, Brian, you ready to back Oral Roberts or what?
I think they might have a prayer.
Oh, good one. We're going to have to get you on TV for that one. You can join Oral doing that. Hey, let's bring on CJ Moore. Let's wrap things up here with our buddy CJ Moore talking games against the spread. CJ, actually, you know what? Let's jump right on that game since we were just talking about it. Arkansas and Oral Roberts in the South region. As I just said, Arkansas 11.5 point favorites in this game against Oral Roberts. I am thinking that the ride is coming to an end here. They looked awesome, right? They earned those victories to get to this point against Ohio State and against Florida in the second round. But here against Arkansas, I think this team's got the right formula, not only to win, but to win comfortably. Where are you at on this one?
Yeah, I think Arkansas is going to win, and this is often when you get to feel great about yourself for a week, and then it ends in the Sweet 16. Right. But that's a big line, 11.5. I feel like they're talented enough to play with Arkansas. And if you go back to ORU's early games in the season, they played bigger schools close. Even I watched them play Missouri, and that game got away from them. But, they were in it for quite a while. So I think ORU's got at least a shot to keep it close. I probably wouldn't bet that game. But if I was forced to pick, I think I'd have ORU covering. How do you guys feel about it?
Well, I look at, Oral Roberts led Arkansas at halftime in the game they played in December, kept it pretty close, but both teams are so different now. Arkansas is so much better than they were in December. And of course, Oral Roberts playing a lot better than they did even then. So, I think that the line is probably about right. But, with Max Asmus and Kevin O'Banner, the way they're shooting the ball, if they're out there bombing threes, I think they could keep this to single digits. But I don't like them to win this game.
Yeah,
just easy stay away for me. Easy stay away.
For sure. It's one of those situations like in the last round in Florida game. I felt like, okay, maybe ORU has the best two players in this game. I'm not sure that's the case against Arkansas, but it's not overwhelming that Arkansas's best guys are better than those two dudes. So it's a stay away for me. But if I was forced to bet it, I think I'd take the points.
Yeah, it's not like Arkansas has a ton of guys with NCAA tournament experience that came into this tournament. One guy had played one game in the tournament, so it'll be interesting to see how that shapes out. But let's go to Gonzaga versus Creighton, CJ. The line's pretty big here at 13 for a Creighton team that's pretty good. That was top 10 in the preseason and had a nice season, had some ups and downs, but pretty solid season. But I'm not sure this is a great matchup for them against the Zags, just because Creighton likes to is more of an offensively based team, let's put it that way. And I'm not sure defensively how they slow Gonzaga down, but how do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, I don't know how they guard Drew Timme. How did Chris an awesome role guy? He's athletic. I think it was that's how I felt against Oklahoma. I didn't know how Oklahoma guarded Drew Timme. And I felt like in that game, if you could get a prop bet for whatever the points were for Drew Timme, I would tell my friends, take that. And whatever it was, he crushed it, right? And I feel like this is a similar deal. I kind of feel like Creighton's similar to Oklahoma, and they can score, but can they guard Gonzaga? I don't think so. So I think this could be a game like that game was where, Oklahoma hung around for a little bit, but then there was just way, way, way too much Gonzaga. And I would probably take Gonzaga to cover here. That point spread is kind of scary, right? And I do think Creighton's good. I'm a believer in Creighton, and if Creighton was in another region, another game, maybe I'd pick them. You guys know how I feel about Mitch Bollock. Like, I love that dude.
Yeah, absolutely.
You want to see him keep playing, but I think I'd take Gonzaga to cover here.
Yeah, I thought that Jason Scott made a good point about the fact that, let's say Gonzaga is in control. There's 4 minutes. We're at the under 4 timeout. They're up by 16, 17 points. Clearly, they're advancing to the Elite Eight. They've got another game in 2 days. Like, does Mark Few just, sit down Timmy and Jalen Suggs and, call it a day? And does Creighton then from that point forward outscore him by 6 points and end up, backdoor covering? Like, that's the one thing that would concern me about backing Gonzaga. Otherwise, if we knew that they were going to that they would ultimately play this to the buzzer, not because it's close, but just because why the hell not, I would feel pretty comfortable about Gonzaga. That's the one thing that maybe keeps me off the Zags. But still, I feel like if this is anything for me, it is Gonzaga or a stay away. I'm gonna let you, Brian, take the Pac-12 game that we've got in the Sweet 16, because I know that you've got a strong opinion on it, and I think CJ does as well, and I think you guys are going up against one another in that one. So I'll take, Midwest region, number 8 Loyola, 6.5-point favorites against Oregon State here. I want to like Loyola. I want to feel comfortable about laying 6.5 because of their defense and because we're talking about, 2 big guys on this team, Cam Krutwig and Lucas Williamson. We're big contributors on that Final Four team. I mean, it's not often that you look at a team like Loyola as having this deep tournament experience, but that's exactly what this Loyola team does have. But 6.5 for a team that really doesn't score it at an incredibly high level against a very hot Oregon State team, it feels like a lot to me. Where are you at on this one, CJ?
Well, Loyola is the better team, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Oregon State, it's another situation where, like, that team hasn't been that great this year, and they get a week to really feel good about themselves. And it's almost one of those Cinderella stories that might end. Loyola's Cameron Krutwig's been here before. They've been on a tournament run. I just think they're the better team. I thought that Oregon State was a perfect or was a terrible matchup for Oklahoma State. It was a great matchup for Oregon State because Oklahoma State couldn't stop big men. And that was their problem this year. They didn't face it that much in the Big 12 because the Big 12 didn't have elite post-up big guys. But Oregon State controlled the first half of that game because of that. And I think Loyola is another kind of beast. And, Cameron Krutwig will be able to deal with their bigs. 6.5 is maybe a little big on the line, but I still think I'm on the Loyola side.
Yeah, I'm with you there, and especially because this game's at Banker's Life, and I really enjoyed the Tinkle at Hinkle hashtag that was trending for Wayne Tinkle earlier. But let's get back to the Pac-12 tournament, which is the NCAA tournament this year. USC-Oregon here in the Pac-12 semis, I guess. Really, really fun game, even though it is an interconference game. Obviously, USC won the game earlier against Oregon pretty handily without Isaiah Mobley. So you would think they have a big advantage here. We were talking yesterday, CJ. I like Oregon as a long shot to get to the Final Four, only because I think of the two teams, they probably match up a little bit better with Gonzaga defensively with their wings. But this is a tough matchup for them. Tough matchup for anybody if Evan Mobley is going to play, at his peak. And boy, they were making shots against Kansas. That was just the USC hasn't played that well all year. I can guarantee you that. But no. Where are you on this game?
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. Like I've watched USC maybe 5-6 times this year, and that team that beat Kansas, like I haven't seen that team play.
No.
So and Evan Mobley, like he's kind of just a guy usually, and he was a dude that day. So if he can keep playing like that, like keep riding with USC. But this is tough. I heard somebody who described Dana Altman this week as like a witch in the NCAA tournament. That matchup zone and the way he can switch defenses. Obviously, USC can play some zone and switch defenses as well. But I mean, I would be scared in the coaching matchup here. It maybe be a stay away for me because I don't know that I want to bet against Dana Altman. But forced to choose, I think I like USC's talent just a little bit better because of Evan Mobley and now the new Isaiah Mobley. But it's almost like a coin flip for me. We've said stay away game a few times. This would be a game where, like, if you feel strong on one end, the line's small enough, you should bet it. But I pick USC, but I don't feel great about it.
Yeah. I mean, give Dana Altman a few days to prepare, and I think he's going to cook something up in the lab defensively, but we'll see if it's enough.
It's almost like Syracuse though, where he is more difficult to prepare for in the 32 and the 8.
Yeah,
right.
He would be a Sweet 16.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the one thing for USC. Plus, they play him every year. I think if Syracuse were to get matched up against an ACC team in the NCAA tournament, it wouldn't be quite as scary for those teams because they deal with it every year. But you don't see anything like the Syracuse zone all season, and same thing with the way Oregon plays. I mean, the matchup zone and stuff, like you don't see that kind of defense very often.
Yeah, USC is going to have a level of comfort with it. We just talked about this with Matthew Gutierrez yesterday, right? That last few times Syracuse has made this run, it's been an ACC team. Once North Carolina, once Duke, taking them out of the NCAA tournament. That's CJ Moore joining us once again on Ding U. CJ, thank you very much. Have a good weekend. Enjoy the games. We'll talk to you for the Elite Eight next week.
Appreciate you guys.
All right, Brian, let's call it a show. Just one more thing here. Absolute best bet of the Sweet 16. Obviously, we've talked through all 8 games, so it's going to be something we've already hit on, but give us a quick one. 30 seconds here. What's your best bet and why?
Well, as long as that Bama line doesn't keep rising, I'm all over Alabama. I like Baylor too. Those are my 2 best bets for this weekend, and I think they're the 2 of the best teams remaining. 2 good matchups for them. That's where I would lean.
Yeah, I'm with you on Alabama. I'm totally there. As for all the reasons that we've said, just think that this is a Final Four quality team, and I think they ultimately are getting to the Final Four. I think they end that run here this week and win their Sweet 16 game by more than the 6.5 that they are asked to win by for the cover. And I'll throw Michigan back out there. I mean, again, this is an excellent team with or without Isaiah Livers. The 2.5-point line. Obviously, there's some room for Michigan to win and for me to lose, backing them against the spread. But I think that trio with Dickinson, Wagner, and Eli Brooks is really going to be the type of trio that can challenge the strength of Florida State, the length and the depth. I think that they can get after them with that. I think we see a big game out of Hunter Dickinson, and we're getting what I think would be just an awesome Elite Eight matchup between Michigan and Alabama. That's going to do it here for this episode of Daily Ding U. Again, everyone out there who's been watching, thank you so much. If you want to catch us again later, we got the podcast available, this video available for you on the Athletic YouTube page. We're going to be taking the weekend off, so use this for your Sweet 16. We'll be back with you with episodes on both Monday and Tuesday, previewing that day's Elite Eight games for everyone who is in this show. Jason Scott, Peter Keating, Jordan Brenner, CJ Moore, and of course, my partner here, Brian Bennett. I'm Michael Beller. Thank you so much for watching us. Good luck with all your picks this weekend. We'll talk to you next week.